Yes, good morning and welcome back to the Football Tribe UG channel. Robert Kesakos is your usual suspect. Um, Welcome back to yet another live broadcast. So it's good to have you back. It's good to be back. Yes, I did miss you guys last night. We were unable to make our routine broadcast, uh, but uh, but here we are. Here we are. Here we are. We are back. We are back. We did miss the late night broadcast. I did miss you guys. It was sort of painful to take, but it's a decision that I had to sort of make under the circumstances. But I hope the routine, we will be back to our routine going forward. So there's plenty to discuss this weekend, plenty of things to talk about. Uh, in today's morning sports because it never stops. The news never stops. Um, yesterday there was a bunch of news going around. So today we will be speaking about that. Ange Postecoglou, uh, being sacked at Tottenham Hotspurs, and then we did have the appointment of a new manager at Inter Milan. I think we did speak about that a little bit the other day. There's a new manager who was appointed at Atlanta, and that is Jurisic. Sorry, Juric. Yes, Juric. I think his name is Ivan Juric. Yes, if I'm not mistaken. Ivan Juric, formerly at Southampton. So we're going to be discussing that and much more in today's morning's broadcast as I wait for you guys to join in. Today we do come a bit early as opposed to our routine of doing it between 11 and midday on the weekends. But so we're trying to come early to this morning because we did miss yesterday's broadcast. So we're trying to compensate for that and see if we can be here for much longer than we usually do on the weekends because there's plenty for us to talk about in regards to what's there. I want to say thank you all that have been watching our content. We've been putting out some content. We did. Grizzly, hi, good morning. How are you doing? Thanks for joining us. I can see Myanmar. Hi, how are you doing? Welcome to the broadcast. Please, guys, consider liking the broadcast and also subscribing to the channel if you're new, so that you can help me grow, so that you can help Football Tribe grow. I can see Camden and Gio. Hello, how are you doing? How is your morning? Please like the broadcast, but more importantly, consider subscribing to the channel so that you can help me grow. Thank you so much for all the love from India, from Bangladesh, from Indonesia, from Uganda, from Kenya, from Brazil, Italy, Germany, the UK, but most importantly, India. Thank you so much for the love and support there. I would be interested in knowing where you guys joining us from this beautiful morning. It's about 6 minutes to the hour of 10 a.m., which means it could be around midday in India or elsewhere. So kindly like the broadcast, but also consider subscribing to the channel if you're new. I can see Kwaria Shazia says hi. Hello, Kwazia. How are you doing? Where are you joining us from this morning? Please do let me know. Because I'm really interested in knowing where you guys are joining me from. Personally, I'm streaming from Kampala, Uganda, in case you're wondering. I'm streaming from Kampala, Uganda. That's where I'm coming to you live from. But thank you so much, guys, for the love and support. Thank you so much for the love and support. Thank you to all our new community members. It's a pleasure having you join the Football Tribe community. It's been really good. But I've received a lot of love from India, from Uganda. I've received a lot of love from Bangladesh, from Indonesia. There's a colleague, a usual suspect of ours there, called Ahmad Septa. Then from Turkey, our colleague Safa Ali, and there's Explorer, and so many others. So thank you so much for the love and support. that you've rendered to Football Tribe, that you've rendered to this channel to see us grow to where we have gone, but we continue to desire to grow and perhaps get to monetize this channel in the future. That's one of the objectives, but that comes by meeting certain numbers. I can see is it Winbury? Is it Winbury? Yes, Winbury. Hi, Winbury. How are you doing? Why are you joining us from this morning? It's good to have you on the broadcast. Much appreciated for the love and support. But kindly consider subscribing to the channel if you're new here. It's a sports channel. It's a football channel, I must say. And this says, hola, Blackie. Hola to you too. Hola to you too. Good to have you. Kindly consider subscribing to the channel, but also like the broadcast. It's a sports channel and it's a football channel. I do understand that many of you may not be, some of you may not be football fans, may not be sports fans, but I do appreciate the love and support still. For those of you that even without much love for the sport, do care to be here with me and, you know, watch what I do, like the broadcasts, subscribe to the channel. I really, really appreciate your efforts, regardless of where your most allegiances lie in regards to sports in general. For example, friends in India, I can see Kavinsky Night Glow says good morning. Good morning to you too. I'm not sure if I should call you my brother or my sister. I do not know. I can see thanks for Ange for winning us a trophy, even though Levy never backed you properly. The restrictions are known to all that the club. Kavinsky, are you a Tottenham Hotspur fan? Because we want to start this morning's conversation at Tottenham Hotspurs, where the majority of the news has made the headlines or has come from in regards to the sacking of the 59-year-old Austrian gaffer. That's Ange Postecoglou, who was only appointed 2 years ago in June 2023 when he left Celtic. So through and through, Spurs for life. That's good. That's good. I mean, and yes, and it's good to start with you that you're giving us your opinions in regards to the sacking of your manager, who has been there for the last 2 years, who has won for you the first title in 17 years. The last time you had won a title or a major trophy was back in 2008 when you beat up against Chelsea by 2-1 in the EFL Cup final. Chelsea had a free kick scored by Didier Drogba in that game, while Dimitar Berbatov scored from the penalty spot to make it 1-1, and then Jonathan Woodgate scored the winning goal on the evening. I remember, yes, Tottenham Hotspurs were under the charges of Joan Ramos, who was an interim coach at the time, and then he was later in the summer of 2008. They appointed Harry Redknapp, who I think had been living, who was coming from Portsmouth there, who, by the way, Portsmouth, I think won the FA Cup in that same year. So around that period of time. So you say, yes, our fourth European trophy. Yes, your fourth European trophy, but he was also the third manager to win you that trophy. And indeed, that's pretty much what the thanks or the sort of tribute that Tottenham Hotspurs were able to accord him said just as much. So quite impressive. This morning, we did wake up to a thank you message by one of his players. That's Pedro Porro, the Spanish international, saying thank you for everything, boss, for mentoring me early on, helping me settle into the club and trusting me out on the pitch. I'll always be grateful for the way you led us, defended us, and kept us going through all the highs and lows. Above everything, you gave us one of the greatest moments in the club's history, and for that, you'll always be celebrated. Wishing you all the very best, boss. So there you have it, one of his players coming out to at least send his message of thanks to now a sacked Ange Postecoglou there, who, like he did say, he does always win something in his second year or his second season. While he had promised us a season 3 where things get better, unfortunately for him, Danny Levy did not let him reach that point in his Tottenham career, so he decided to show him the exit. And that means that Tottenham will be in search for another manager. Now, Tottenham have gone through a couple of managers ever since the sacking of Mauricio Pochettino, and that was in November 2019. He was sacked, even having guided Tottenham to the finals of the UEFA Champions League when they lost to Liverpool in 2019 by 2-0. Mohamed Salah, I think in the third or second minute thereabout, on target for Liverpool, as well as Divock Origi. I think he scored that goal either in the 83rd or 85th minute thereabout, as Liverpool won their sixth UEFA Champions League title under the charges of Jurgen Klopp. So the subsequent season, that was 2019-2020, unfortunately, he was shown the exit on November 19th. He was sacked from Tottenham Hotspurs. I can see Kavinsky, you say it doesn't matter. You say it doesn't matter what manager comes to Tottenham, they cannot work under Danny Levy. Now, unfortunately, as good as your submission is, I think Danny Levy is still here to stay as Tottenham Hotspur chairman. Again, we're going to speak about maybe a little bit about that in just a bit. So when Mauricio Pochettino was sacked in November 2019, he was immediately replaced by Jose Mourinho, who was appointed the following day. The former Chelsea and Manchester United manager was appointed and was there for exactly 1 year and a half, 1 year and 6 months. And with just days left, I think just 6 days left to the finals of the Carabao Cup, which Tottenham eventually lost to Man City by 1-0. Jose Mourinho was sacked, and he went on to question Tottenham's mentality in regards to winning, wanting to win. And I think that speaks to Kavinsky's submission to say that regardless of the manager that will be appointed, they may not succeed under Danny Levy as chairman, because as a chairman of the club, I think it was a costly mistake for Tottenham to sack Jose Mourinho at the time before him guiding them through the Carabao Cup. I could almost guarantee in some form or way, at least with a 75% chance, that Tottenham would have won that Carabao Cup had Jose Mourinho been in charge, because tactically he's one of those managers that are quite astute when it comes to playing finals, but also in some way he had managed to get a number over Pep Guardiola. He knew how to get in his head. He knew how to beat Pep Guardiola. So I think he could have really guided Tottenham Hotspurs to a major trophy that year in 2021. But unfortunately, on April 19th, he was equally sacked just 6 days before the final of the Carabao Cup. Kavinsky says, continues to submit that Ange winning a trophy under the restrictions caused by Levy means that it was a miracle that he won a trophy. It's cheaper to sack managers and then give them cheaper players on cheaper wages in the transfer window. Then he goes on to submit that before the League Cup final against Man City, yes, it just shows that Levy doesn't care about trophies. It's all about money. I mean, it is really hard to disqualify the argument that Danny Levy cares about money, because Tottenham is arguably one of the best run clubs in terms of being financially healthy. In terms of the kind of business they do, in terms of selling players, in terms of buying players, in terms of the wages, they do sort of maintain quite a very restrictive budget. And over the years, we've seen them trade off some of their best players quite expensively. You remember Luka Modric in 2012 when he left for Real Madrid, and not so long after that, Gareth Bale rising through went for a then record fee that was in the region of about 85 million pounds. I think more than Real Madrid had spent on buying Cristiano Ronaldo for Manchester United in 2009. And then fast forward, we did have a deal for Harry Kane for about 100 million euros going to Bayern Munich. Now, while that is not, that may not be a wrong decision itself in the form of doing business, I think it does speak to the idea that maybe in some way or form, Danny Levy does care about majorly the financial bit of the club. They do have arguably one of the best stadiums in the UK, a 60,000 plus seater, which brings in a good revenue. We all know it's hired for other events and that kind of thing as well. So, but that sacking of Jose Mourinho before the finals of the Carabao Cup is something possibly unforgivable that many Tottenham Hotspur fans will have to remember over the course of time. We have Scott Crystal saying Levy didn't want to have to pay the money for the players Ange needed for season 3. If they get Frank, we will be allowed not to spend much as another rebuild, and fans' expectations will be lowered. I think that is his submission there. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us and for contributing to our discussion this morning regarding the sacking of Ange Postecoglou at Tottenham Hotspurs. I can see Kavinsky comes back to say all Daniel Levy cares about is building as many properties around the stadium to increase the value of the club for a future sale. Well, he's a businessman, so indeed he is money-minded, along perhaps with his partners, the owners of the club. But I think it has come at the expense of maybe the joy and further success of the club. Because when you look back at 2019, when Tottenham Hotspurs reached the finals of the UEFA Champions League, while the following season they seemed to be slipping a bit off, we all thought that Mauricio Pochettino had built quite the project that was bound to be more sustainable. Not that it wouldn't have required more, maybe costly inputs in the form of players, including some false buys that did work out, like Tunkai Ndombele there. But Tottenham had gone to that stage that it had become a competitive club. I mean, it's not every day that you reach the finals of the UEFA Champions League. Present day, as we speak, Arsenal, as big as a club they are, they've only been to one final of the UEFA Champions League, and that was in 2006. Tottenham Hotspurs have the same claim to as far as that competition is concerned. And so, really, it speaks to what Mauricio Pochettino had quite built for Tottenham Hotspurs. Was it the right decision at the time? Maybe it felt that way, but in the long run, it hasn't really borne the fruits that we all hoped that it would bear. Because I thought, yes, sometimes managers do have bad seasons. We've seen that with Atletico Madrid when they chose to start with Diego Simeone. You remember back in 2014 when they reached the finals of the UEFA Champions League and lost to Real Madrid. The following season, which was 2015, they never made it back to the final, and yet they still stuck with the manager. Not to say that their league performance was as bad as maybe as the form was slipping away for Mauricio Pochettino, but in some way, it was 1 year later, that was back again in 2016, that again they reached the finals of the UEFA Champions League. Again, never mind that they were unsuccessful in that attempt to win the competition as well. So I think it speaks to sort of building a longer-term project, but also more importantly, the replacement in Jose Mourinho. Yes, Jose Mourinho does have his quarrels here and there, and we can all agree on that, and I think he does submit just as much. But I think Tottenham ought to think as a bigger club. Let's not forget, Antonio Conte further said something similar in regards to Tottenham's mentality and wanting to win major trophies. Ange Postecoglou last season, in his debut season 2023-2024, he did come out to say that he questioned the mentality around the club, that fans, and maybe in some form or way, that maybe some players could have felt the same way, that it was better for them to lose their game against Man City if it meant that Arsenal do not win the title, which cost them a qualification to the UEFA Champions League the following season. So some of you do, I'm sure you do remember that. Anyways, to proceed with your comments, Kavinsky, you come back to say yes, but when we got to the final of the UEFA Champions League, our squad was depleted, so we didn't have the quality to beat Liverpool. That's true, but also, I mean, I do not know the last time it happened, or when a first-time UEFA Champions League finalist went on to win it in that very first time of reaching the finals. I mean, take recent examples of PSG reaching there in 2020. They lost to Bayern Munich. It's not because they didn't have the good players to try and win that final. They did, but they still lost. Take the example of Chelsea versus Manchester United in 2008 in Moscow, Russia. For that final, they lost to Man United on penalties. It's not because Chelsea were not good enough to try and win that, but there were 5 timers in as far as the UEFA Champions League final was concerned. The other example was Manchester City in 2021. They went on to lose to Chelsea, a Chelsea side that they were arguably better than, because we are talking about a team that had won the Premier League title already. So again, it was not because Man City were not good enough to beat up against Chelsea, but usually first timers, whether it's out of some form of jiu-jitsu or some form of I do not know, sort of a final flight, stage flight of being at that stage for the first time. I do not know what it is, but usually first timers fail to win the UEFA Champions League title in their first final. So I think those are some of the examples that we can refer to. So you say the squad was depleted. Then you say Levy's long-term project never ends. It's taken 17 years to win that second trophy under his reign. Conte had a terrible backline at Tottenham. Again, he wasn't backed with a top quality, as Levy refuses to buy top quality ready-made stars. Chelsea had made endless amounts of cash to buy the best players. Tottenham did not operate like the elite club. That is true when it comes to day-to-day operations, when it comes to how Tottenham Hotspurs usually go about their business in terms of player recruitment. It's not every day that they go out there to buy a standout player that is already a bona fide star, so to speak, quote unquote. In any case, in recent times, we've seen they went for maybe Dominic Solanke is good in terms of a replacement for Harry Kane, although his numbers have not justified as much. But when you look at most of their recruitments, when you look at the goalkeeper in Guillermo Vicario, not many of us knew him until he joined Tottenham Hotspurs. When you look at players like Destiny Udogie, when we go back to the years when they brought in Son Heung-min, I mean, he's been proved to be a very, very good player, which says that you do not always have to look out for a star player to build a winning team, but you need those marksmen. You need those players. There are those purchases big clubs make to try and motivate the players that they already have, that, look, we are trying to build something big. We are trying to be ambitious. Again, unfortunately, allow me, Tottenham fans, use the example of Arsenal. In this Mikel Arteta era that is yet to bear fruit, when they went all in on Declan Rice, £100 million purchase, that is a show of intent to the Arsenal players in that dressing room and the fans outside, that we are being intentional. We do want to win major trophies and we are willing to make the investment. Of course, you may question some decisions at Arsenal, but that notwithstanding, at least there's been a show of intent. And that show of intent, you've seen it in the form of marquee signings. And possibly this summer, they could potentially go out and make another 1 or 2. So Tottenham Hotspurs, even when they do smart business, as it could be looked at, for example, going out to get Jovis Bissouma, going out to get a Pape Matsar, a Rodrigo Bentancur, a Lucas Bagville, a Dejan Kulusevski. I mean, all that is smart business. But also, when you lose a player like Gareth Bale, you need to replace him with maybe a fairly good player in terms of being made in some form or way or to a certain stage. So for me, it speaks to that as well. So again, to continue with your comments, Kavinsky, you say, look at Manchester City since last January transfer window up to today's summer transfer windows. They are spending huge. Daniel Levy buys players with potential for future sell value. I think that is partly true, because today, if you went into Tottenham Hotspurs and let's say you wanted to sign a player like Destiny Udogie, who I think is a good player, or Dejan Space, who I equally think is a good player, not that they are being targeted at the moment to the best of my knowledge, but as long as you have the good money, he is always willing to make a business. So I think it speaks to that. We're going to expound on Man City in just a bit. So when Jose Mourinho gets sacked that's in April 2021, he is quickly, of course, we're at the tail end of the season, and Ray Mason, who by the way did leave the club, at the end of the just concluded season, took over as an interim, and then Nuno Espirito Santo was appointed that June, only for him to be sacked just a couple of months later, because he was appointed in June, and by November 1st, he was called, he was sacked due to a poor run of results at the start of the season. Now, again, it usually begs the question of where did things go wrong for Nuno Espirito Santo? Because I've never believed or thought that he is a bad manager. He's a manager that I think I've fairly followed for a bit of time. Looking back at his days, I think at Sevilla, looking back at his days at Wolverhampton Wanderers, what he was able to achieve with that team. We've seen what he's been able to do with Nottingham Forest, but it also begs the question of whether he's best suited to mid-table teams or teams with significantly lower expectations, quote unquote, not to pass any form of disrespect or prejudice on Nottingham Forest or Wolverhampton Wanderers, because we're talking about the Nottingham Forest side that won the Champions League title or the European Cup back in 1979. So, no disrespect to them, but in regards of recent pressure as being head or manager of a team like Nottingham Forest, I think maybe it comes with less pressure, but also walking into a Tottenham Hotspur side where you had Jose Mourinho, and his playing style is quite different, and you're trying to implement your own, style. You want to build your own team, and again, it's been said time and again that usually a new manager needs at least 2 to 3 transfer windows for them to get a team into their own hands, into their shape, because you walk into the door and sometimes maybe the players that you have are not bad, but may not be suitable for the kind of system that you want to play. We've seen that happen with Manchester United again. When Eric Ten Hag walked in, he was back to try and get some signings, the likes of Tyler Malacia, Anthony, Lisandro Martinez, and bringing in Andre Onana to get players that he thought would fit in his mold. Regardless of what the end result was, at least he was trying to build towards that direction, and he was further continued to be back in the subsequent transfer windows. Then we've seen what has happened with Ruben Amorim at Manchester United. He's walked in there. Now, oftentimes we say Manchester United have been buying bad players, they've been making bad business. I mean, I do not think they've been buying bad players, but I do get the feeling that Manchester United have been making good players. But for me, that's how I look at it, because how many top talents have walked in that door and have not lived to their expectations? Let's not forget, Angelo Di Maria moved to Manchester United from Real Madrid. They had the Radamel Falcao at some point. They did have Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who did really, really well, helping them win also the UEFA Europa League title in 2017 under Jose Mourinho and the Carabao Cup. But what was it that time? Yes, around that time. Anyways, but you look at players like Jadon Sancho. He was smashing it at Dortmund. He comes to United, and all of a sudden he's that bad. I certainly do not think so. I do not think he's that bad a player as they make it sound. Bruno Fernandes has been a standout player. He's been sort of the lighting matchstick in sort of a dark tunnel at Manchester United. Once in a while, Harry Maguire, bought for £85 million from Leicester City, was a top defender, and I do not think he certainly ever reached back the level at the time of his purchase. Back, I think, was it in 2021? I think around 2021. That's when they buy him, or slightly before that, or because that's the same summer when Jadon Sancho also joins. So I do not think innately they are all bad players. Yes, you could have gotten some buys wrong. I think Anthony may have been a wrong buy. He may have not been a player suited for the Premier League, but essentially, I do not think that all of them have been bad players. So Nuno Espirito Santo was quickly sacked. That was on November 1st, 2021, and he was quickly, just 2 days later, replaced by Antonio Conte. Now, Antonio Conte was also there between November 2021 until March 2023. That's about relatively almost a year and a half, close to a year and a half, and he was equally shown the exit. Again, yes, in terms of the manager that he is, Antonio Conte, because he has that urge to win, to be a winner, to want to win things with his team, with his clubs. He calls for that investment. He does not shy away from publicly critiquing players or even club owners who think are not towing to the good that leads him to achieve that. So he did question Tottenham's mentality or the club's culture as a whole in regards to their ambitions, saying that they are not ambitious enough. Anyway, he was eventually shown the exit and was replaced by Christian Stenelli as an interim. He was his assistant at the time, but he was equally, I think, in less than a month, equally shown the exit, and then Ryan Mason took charge of the club until the end of the season. And then in June 2023, there we did see the coming of Ange Postecoglou as he left Celtic to join Tottenham. Now, again, now you've had three managers, by the way, in Ange Postecoglou, in Jose Mourinho, and Antonio Conte, question sort of the quote-unquote, the culture or the mentality and the desire, the ambition of the club in terms of winning major trophies. And again, I think it largely speaks to Kavinsky's submissions. And to go back just briefly, I think Scott, who sort of highlight the way Tottenham Hotspurs conduct business, the way they conduct themselves in the market, the way they sort of try to build a winning club. And he speaks of the fact that it's taken Danny Levy 17 years to build a team that won, a major title. And apologies on that, guys. Apologies. Somebody is trying to call my phone and to be back. Yes, apologies on that. Apologies on that. Somebody was trying to call my phone. I forgot to put it in airplane mode. So, anyways, like I was saying, Tottenham Hotspurs sort of conduct themselves that way, and they've faced a lot of criticism in the way they conduct business, in the way they build that team. Okay, buddy, have to go. So let us. Nice meeting you. Thank you so much, Kavinsky, for being with us and for all your contribution to this debate and discussion this morning. But before you sign out, please do let me know what your opinions are on the potential replacements. I know Thomas Frank has been mentioned as the leading contender, but Marco Silva has been mentioned in that line, as well as Bournemouth's Andoni Iraola has equally been sort of introduced to the topic of the potential replacement. Who of those, if they were to be the top candidates, would you think is best suited to come and sort of get Tottenham Hotspurs back competitively, at least in as far as the Premier League is concerned? Because last season, indeed, they did not compete, and that formed the basis of review for Danny Levy to draw the conclusion to sack the manager in Ange Postecoglou, saying that he had very, very poor results. And to be honest, his Premier League results were not any good. I mean, 22 losses in a season of 38 games, 11 wins and 5 draws, and not the kind of results that sort of communicate your prowess or to your credibility as a manager. So let's wait and see. A manager from mid-table, guess Frank Glasner, maybe Fulham manager, and maybe the Bournemouth manager. Anyways, later, Kavinsky. Thank you so much. So those are the managers that are being lined up as potential replacements for Ange Postecoglou. There you have Thomas Frank from Brentford. You have Oliver Glasner of Crystal Palace. Now, among all of them, Oliver Glasner for me stands out because he did win the finals. He did win the UEFA Europa League. That was in 2022 with Eintracht Frankfurt. And then he just guided Crystal Palace to the triumph of the FA Cup that pretty much we saw. And Ability Easy scoring the only goal as they beat up against Man City in the final. So really quite impressive. So he does stand out as a manager with some level of experience in managing a team that is on the continent, especially when it comes to, I do not know if he did manage the club during their first season in the UEFA Champions League, but at least he has that European experience, which cannot be said about Thomas Frank. Just a second. So among all the top candidates that they are lining up for as replacements for Ange Postecoglou, I do not think that really Thomas Frank measures up. Yes, he's well spoken about. He's a good manager. He's been at Brentford for what? 7, 8 years. He did join them back in 2018. He guided them to the promotion from the Championship to the Premier League. That was in 2021, and he's kept them in top of the Premier League or in the Premier League for the last 4 seasons. That's 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, and 2025. And they did finish 10 on that Premier League table with 56 points as their point tally behind Bournemouth, who finished with a similar number of points. So he's done well with Brentford, but then again, it takes us back to the discussion or where we do question whether a manager of that caliber can stand can stand the pressure of being at a team like Tottenham Hotspur. Can he contend with that? Because it comes with its own pressures. We are talking about the Tottenham Hotspur that have been so bad last season that they finished 17th on the Premier League table. Now, of course, in Ange's sort of excusable maybe way out of it, he does argue the case of injuries, which did really have an impact on his team. But again, even when you have as many injuries, for a top manager, you ought to figure out some form of way not lose as many as 22 games, which in another season could have easily, had you relegated. So because I think Tottenham looked solely on that to pass judgment on Ange Postecoglou before sacking him. And their message said just as much, because they said, following a review of performance and after significant reflection, the club can announce that Ange Postecoglou has been relieved of his duties. Now, of course, the review being the Premier League, where it was so bad. Yes, they had injuries, including their goalkeeper, Guillermo Vicario, being out injured, Christian Romero and Mickey Van de Ven, all injured, James Maddison even missed the UEFA Europa League final through injury. Dominic Solanke was out for his own spell. Juvis Bissouma, Dijad Kulusevski was always in and out of the team. By the time we reached the finals of the UEFA Europa League, Lucas Bagville was a potential doubt for that particular game. So overall, the team was troubled by so many injuries. But they weren't the only team troubled by injuries. And yet, not all teams that did have injury troubles performed just as bad. So maybe it spoke to that. So when Ange Postecoglou had all those challenges, especially with his squad, he chose to say, let our focus be the UEFA Europa League. Let's try and win that, get UEFA Champions League football, but also try not to get relegated. I think he reduced their ambitions to as simple as not being relegated in the Premier League. So, and yes, while he was able to achieve that, finishing 17th on the Premier League log really did not leave him in the good books, but at least it will go down that he is the third manager to win Tottenham Hotspur a European trophy, and also the manager that sort of broke the Spursy curse that had been on for 17 years, with them not winning any major trophies. So that's the debate or formulation about Tottenham Hotspur and regards to Ange Postecoglou. Now, speaking about, again, their potential managerial replacements, Marco Silva. Now, Marco Silva is one of those managers that are good, but sometimes I think he's sort of succumbed to the pressures of being at a bigger team. We do remember he was at Everton at some point, and he sort of struggled. And he was eventually sacked. When he was sacked, and then he ended up at Fulham. So that was in 2018, 2019. He was at the club, and by December he was sacked because the team was facing relegation. And I think that's when was that when Frank Lampard walks in to try and salvage the day, or Sean Dyche? Anyways, but he did struggle. And then Andoni Iraola, for me, has been quite a revelation. Another manager from Juan Sebastian in Spain, that sort of region that has produced so many good managers, including Mikel Arteta, regardless that he is yet to win anything. That notwithstanding, I think he is quite a good manager in manner of speaking. So let's wait and see what decision Tottenham eventually make in regards to who their managerial replacement will be. But Thomas Frank is a leading contender, and it's not the first time he's been part of these kinds of debates. When Manchester United were searching for a new manager back in the summer, when they were yet to make a decision on whether to sack Ten Hag or to retain him, was one of those managerial considerations. When Chelsea were looking for a manager, he was one of those considerations before they appointed Enzo Maresca, and even before they appointed Graham Potter in a couple of years gone back. So you've seen that he's always been in those kinds of conversations. And even before, Tottenham appointed Ange Postecoglou himself, he was in the conversation, he was in the talks for potential, managerial role at Tottenham. So he's always been in those conversations, but he had not been able to make the leap. Will he be the next victim in the form of Graham Potter? Because we remember Graham Potter went to Chelsea, put pen to paper, I think, on a 6-year deal, and months later he was sacked. And now currently he's with West Ham United, trying to get the things done. So whether he will be successful at Tottenham Hotspurs or not remains to be seen. But at least that is really happening. Anyways, let's move away from the conversation about Tottenham Hotspurs and speak other teams, because there's plenty of news that's been making the rounds in as far as transfers are concerned, including from Liverpool, from Manchester United, as well as other clubs. At Manchester United, they did make a second bid in the excess of £60 million to try and sign Bryan Mbuwemo from Brentford. Just the other day, they did submit their first bid after the 25-year-old Cameroon international did acknowledge that he would favor a move to Old Trafford as opposed to any other suitors that did include Arsenal, Newcastle, and Tottenham Hotspurs. And in the wake of that news, sort of giving Manchester United the encouragement that, guys, come and take me. They made their first bid in the region of £55 million, with £45 million being the guaranteed payable fees, with £10 million in expected add-ons. And that offer was rejected because Brentford are trying to use the benchmark for Man United paying £62.5 million as the release clause for Matthias Cunha from Wolverhampton Wanderers. And they are saying, I mean, you just bought Matthias Cunha for that amount. We think our player is just as good or even better, because when you look at their numbers, Matthias Cunha scored 15 goals and provided 6 assists during the course of the campaign, while Bryan Mbuwemo scored 20 Premier League goals and provided 7 assists. That's a goal involvement of 21 versus 26. So when it comes to such numbers, I think they do have a point. When you look at the Premier League table, Brentford finished what? Finished 10th, while Wolverhampton Wanderers finished 16th on the Premier League table. So when you look at those comparisons, I think Brentford are well within their means, even when the player has only a year left on his contract. But they are under no pressure to sell, even with just a year left to his contract, because within that same contract, they do have an option to extend his stay for a further year. So they could easily exercise that option and have the player stay for another 2 years. So they are in no rush to sell. They will try and squeeze Manchester United as hard as they can to make sure that United pay an even bigger fee for the Cameroon international, who has been quite impressive. Can play across the entire front line, whether you want him as a false 9, whether you want him as a 10, from the right wing, left wing, he can put in the shift. And he did, I think he was one of in the top 3 in terms of, leading press and, in terms of leading the press, trying to win back the balls, or what they call pressures, and those kinds of statistics. So he's quite an athletic player that Manchester United are focused on. I think Ruben Amorim wants to play with 2 or 3 10s in his team. And although I do not subscribe to the school of thought that Bruno Fernandes can play in a deep line role as a midfielder, as a number 8, I think he wants to deploy him in that similar format and have, the wing backs of either a Patrick Dogu, who then plays predominantly as a midfielder, but also running across the wings. And then you have Amadou Diallo on one side, where he also pushes further up front. And then you have one of the back threes try to cover his line of defense. And then you have either Casemiro or Manuel Ugarte playing alongside Bruno Fernandes. And then ahead of them, you would have a Bryan Mbuwemo, a Matthias Cunha, and maybe a striker. Whether it's Victor Gyökeres, who they are looking to sign, and according to reports, is open to joining Manchester United, even without UEFA Champions League football, remains to be seen, or whether it is Joshua Zirkzee, whether Rasmus Højlund, although I do not think it will be him, because there is interest in the Danish star from clubs like Inter Milan, from clubs like Juventus, as well as Napoli, who are really eyeing to resign him after 2 seasons of failing to impress in the Premier League. So he did score only 4 goals this season in the Premier League in over 30 appearances. And then his counterpart in Joshua Zirkzee could only manage 3 goals. So Man United are looking to add both players in their prime, because Cunha just turned 26, Mbuwemo is 25, players that are really, really in their prime, players that are going to give you goals, players that are good at assisting play, and that kind of thing. So let's wait and see if Manchester United will be successful in their pursuit of Bryan Mbuwemo, but they are being quite intentional. They want to wrap things up as early as possible in the transfer window with Jason Wilcox, who was recently promoted from being academy manager or director to being the director of football at Manchester United, being pivotal in these kinds of negotiations to make sure that Manchester United do make their business as quickly as possible. And we do know that they are still in the market for a striker after losing out on Liam Delap, who went to Chelsea. So again, I think they could turn their attention to Victor Gyökeres, although they've also been mentioned in the conversation for Benjamin Sesko. But let's wait and see how Man United will look to conduct their business in as far as those pursuits are concerned. So, and this was according to Ben Jacobs. He did say that Gyökeres remains open to Manchester United, even without Champions League football, as revealed yesterday, even though Manchester United haven't made any approaches yet. Now, he did previously say that while United have not made any formal approaches yet, the player remains in contact with his former manager, Ruben Amorim. And we've spoken, I think, at great length about the policies of the player, whether he will be suitable for the Premier League. But I think among all the teams that have been speculated to be suitors of Victor Gyökeres, including Arsenal, Chelsea, among others, I think United would better suit him, because he will be working with a manager that he knows quite well, in whose system he has played before, and he's been quite successful. So I think in terms of odds of success, that would give him better odds to try and succeed in English football. So there's that as well. And then, of course, in an interesting twist or turn of events, yesterday, Al Hilal, that's the Saudi Pro League outfit, did return back into conversations for Victor Osimhen. Now, earlier on, there had been reports that Al Hilal had walked away from these negotiations because they felt the player was demanding for too much. But by the close of the day yesterday, he had reached an agreement with Al Hilal over a net salary of about 40 million euros. Initially, their offer had been 30 million euros. He asked for 40, they increased it to 35. And then at that point, that's when, talks of, negotiations breaking down had started to come in. And then eventually they put in the shift. I think that was after appointing Simone Inzaghi as their new manager to replace George Jesus. Simone Inzaghi, as soon as he part ways with Inter Milan, the next day he was signing as Al Hilal's manager, because he had been their priority target for a manager this summer, even though they had held conversations with Marco Silva and Andoni Iraola, both of whom turned them down. So we did have that. But also in the midst of all that, Galatasaray were really, really pushing to try and sign him on a permanent deal. Remember, last season, Victor Osimhen was with Galatasaray, and he made 29 league appearances, scored 26 goals, and provided 5 assists. That's a 31 goal contribution in 29 games. So he had done quite well to impress that they were willing to break the bank, that they are willing to break the bank and try and sign him permanently. Yes, they were still short on valuation between themselves, that's Galatasaray, and the parent club in Napoli. But on wages, they had also yet to sort of persuade the player, who, by the way, his relationship with Napoli broke down when they failed to sell him off, largely because of his wages. At Napoli, it was on a net pay of about 12 million euros, which at some stage they deemed was quite high for them to manage, especially after a poor run of results that threatened their financial status in regards to being in the Champions League and that kind of thing. For those of you that do remember last season, when Inter Milan were last season but one, when Inter Milan were winning back the Scudetto from them, that they had won in 2023. Yes, so it spoke to that, and they looked to move on the player, and most of his suitors were being off-put by his wage demands. So eventually, he ended up on loan to Galatasaray, who had agreed to pay his wages and performed really, really well. So they were looking to retain him as on a permanent basis. However, that seemed to be a bit difficult because they are yet to agree to terms. Initially, their offer had been about 13 million euros as net pay. They improved that to 15 million euros in terms of wage offering and that kind of thing. So Fabrizio Romano last night did reveal that Al Hilal have now improved their proposal to Victor Osimhen, and Napoli tried to reach an agreement soon. Galatasaray have been pushing in the last 24 hours, but Al Hilal keep pushing with improved proposal over 70 million euros to Napoli and higher salary for Osimhen. So that was a part of the revelations that were coming through in regards to a proposed move for the Nigerian star to the Saudi Pro League. Now, remember, Al Hilal are trying to sign some players before the start of the FIFA Club World Cup, in which they will be participating. And after Bruno Fernandes turned them down, they moved on to Anderson, who does play his football at Atlanta. Now, he's a player that Manchester United did monitor before deciding to sign Manuel Ugarte. So they moved their attention to that, although the profile of both players is not the same. But that's at least where they moved their attention in the aftermath of Bruno Fernandes turning them down. And then I'm moving away from Napoli and Victor Osimhen. Where do we go next? Let's go to Liverpool. Liverpool are close, and perhaps this deal could be wrapped next week in negotiations. I think there's still about one meeting left to happen between Liverpool and AFC Bournemouth over the signing of Milos Kerkez. That's the 21-year-old Hungarian international who Liverpool are really, really interested in signing. They want to take him. He did join Bournemouth in July 2023 from AZ Alkmaar. Yes, AZ Alkmaar, and he was quite impressive last season. He did attract the attention of many gigantic teams, including me having him in my team of the season, Premier League team of the season. So that's how good a season he had had. So, anyways, so Liverpool will advance on that to try and complete the deal for Milos Kerkez, but they have also made quite significant strides in their pursuit of Florian Wirtz. And this is according to Sacha Tavoridi there in German, who says Florian Wirtz has received the green light from Bayer Leverkusen to complete his move to Liverpool Football Club next week. Clubs agreed on an amount around 150 million euros, as revealed here. Wirtz decided Liverpool 6 weeks ago. That was Sacha Tavoridi. However, one of the credible sources in as a key part to this whole story, that is Florian Wirtz, who does work with Sky German, did indicate that a total agreement had not yet been struck, although the whole package had sort of been figured out. We all know that Bayer Leverkusen want 150 million euros for the player, but then that begs the question of what is the guaranteed fees, and then what is paid in add-ons, and what sort of payment structure do we go about? Remember, when Liverpool were signing Jeremy Frimpong from the same side, that's Bayer Leverkusen, they agreed to pay the 35 million euros over a course of 3 years in 3 different installments. Now, that's quite a bargain when you're trying to, in as far as installment purchase is concerned. That means you get to spread your payments of just 35 million euros across a space of 3 years. When you look at that Chelsea deal signing Liam Delap from Ipswich Town, Chelsea are going to have to pay 20 million pounds up front to Ipswich Town, and then the other 10 will come in, subsequent installments. So that clearly paints for you the kind of picture in regards to how Liverpool went about well with those negotiations. So Florian Wirtz said, understand Liverpool FC and Bayern Munich, and Bayer Leverkusen have significantly moved closer in a deal for Florian Wirtz after fresh talks and a revised offer. Remember, Liverpool's last bid, which was the second bid of a total package of 130 million euros, had been turned down. So he says the total package is now heading towards 150 million euros, including potential bonus payments. There is still no full agreement between the two clubs, but it's getting very, very close. It's now just a matter of time. So there you have it from these sources. That's why I do say that Liverpool are really, really close to completing this one, and do not be surprised if the player does move next week to do his medicals. So that's the situation at Liverpool. But also staying at Liverpool, Liverpool did turn down advances from Barcelona to try and sign their Colombian forward, Luis Diaz, who, by the way, was speaking during the international engagement. He was speaking to the media, and he did acknowledge that because he's not been offered a new deal at Liverpool, while he's happy there and the city did welcome him well, he could be looking to move on if there's no new offer for him, or he could play out his remaining 2 years. In other words, he's trying to insinuate that maybe they should offer him a new contract at the club. So Barcelona did express their interest in signing Luis Diaz. I think Deco said that out publicly and said they were interested in Luis Diaz and Marcus Rashford. So they did approach Liverpool, and Liverpool turned down those advances for the 28-year Colombian international, who said they are speaking to other clubs. And by speaking to other clubs, I think he means Barcelona must have approached him. Al Nassr are also interested in signing him, and they are willing to make a bid in the region of 85 million euros. Whether Liverpool would have their head stand by that kind of offer remains to be seen, and whether the player would be open to making a move to Saudi Arabia as opposed to staying in Europe, that also remains to be seen. But that is another deal to sort of keep our eyes on, as well as Darwin Núñez. We all know Liverpool want to move on Darwin Núñez. He does have suitors in the Saudi Pro League, but no offers have been made to Liverpool at the moment. So they want to move him on and replace him with either Hugo Ekitike as their number 1 priority or Benjamin Sesko. But in the conversation for Hugo Ekitike, Chelsea are right up there in that mix, and they are having discussions already with Eintracht Frankfurt for the 22-year-old French striker. So again, we'll keep our eyes on that as well. Then moving away from Liverpool, let's quickly run to Arsenal, where they have advanced in talks over Benjamin Sesko. Now, I know we've said this sort of advanced in talks for Benjamin Sesko for quite a while, and the deal in itself is not, Arsenal fans, I think, are growing frustrated. I think we'll put out an episode on Benjamin Sesko alone to try and explain why the situation is the way it is. But according to trusted sources in regards to the Benjamin Sesko story, and this is again by Florian Wirtz, who says Benjamin Sesko is now keen on a move to Arsenal. Negotiations with the player are progressing positively. There has been clear progress in discussions over potential terms, but no full verbal agreement has been reached yet. Arsenal have also not submitted an official offer to RB Leipzig. The atmosphere between all parties is very fair and transparent. Deal on, he says. That's a Florian Wirtz for you. And he comes back to add on to the situation. He says more on the Benjamin Sesko situation, who is keen to join Arsenal, that the talks are advanced on personal terms, that Arsenal cannot simply trigger the 80 million release clause. Now, I think that's where the gist of the conversation is. Earlier on in the window, it was revealed that he has an 80 million euro release clause. But that release clause, I think, based on timelines, or I do not know, some form of deliverables, has since increased. So it remains a bit fluid. That means you cannot sort of guarantee what it is. That when it is fluid, it means it is open for negotiation. Unlike the situation that Chelsea found themselves in the pursuit of Liam Delap, that player has a release clause of £30 million, just trigger that and get the player. Similar to what United did with Matthias Cunha. Player has a 62.5 million release clause, trigger that and get the player. Real Madrid did the same for Dean Howson from AFC Bournemouth to sign him. That's the Spanish young defender. They simply triggered his £50 million release clause. So many Arsenal fans are wondering, why do Arsenal not just trigger the release clause that is reported to be 80 million euros and then get over the deal with? Well, it's not that simple, because that release clause perhaps was time bound or not cast in stone. So it's a bit of a fluid kind of situation where now Arsenal have to sit on the negotiating table with RB Leipzig and say, okay, this is what you want, this is what we are willing to offer for the player, and that kind of thing. So that's why this deal is perhaps taking a little longer than Arsenal fans would desire. Still remaining at Arsenal are interested in signing Chelsea goalkeeper Kepa Arrizabalaga, who spent last season on loan to AFC Bournemouth. We're talking about a UEFA Champions League title winner, both with Chelsea and with Real Madrid. He did win the UEFA Champions League in 2024, where he did spend an entire season on loan there with Real Madrid when they took him as a potential replacement for a then injured Thibaut Courtois. So that's the player Arsenal are targeting. Now, what's the deal with Arsenal and Chelsea rejects? I mean, we've seen this story go on many times. You remember the swap back in the days between Ashley Cole and William Gallas? I mean, of course, we got the bad deal. In that case, Ashley Cole was the much better player as compared to William Gallas, in my opinion. And then we went back, signed Peter Cech. That was around 2016. I think 2015, 2016. Yes, in 2015 actually, because he did feature for Arsenal in the Community Shield game between Arsenal and Chelsea. Arsenal won that game by 1-0. I think it was scored by Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. I stand to be corrected on that fact, but I do remember wondering what Peter Cech was doing in an Arsenal shirt and in an Arsenal goalpost at the time. Remember, Chelsea had won the league in 2015 under the charges of Jose Mourinho, yes, on his second spell at Chelsea. So they met Arsenal, the 2015 FA Cup winners, in the Community Shield. So, and Arsenal won that game by 0-0. So then from Peter Cech, we've seen players like Willian Borges da Silva, quite a horrible signing for Arsenal. We've seen Jorginho move from Chelsea to Arsenal. We've seen a horrible loan spell of Raheem Sterling from Chelsea to Arsenal. We've seen Kai Havertz joining in from Chelsea to Arsenal for £65 million. We've seen David Luiz join from Arsenal from Chelsea. Again, he was sort of kicked out literally at Chelsea, and then Arsenal were like, why not? We could have him. So every time Chelsea feel like bidding a player, Arsenal is always lacking. Unfortunately, we've been sort of in some form of way or shape or been reduced to, dustbin lacquers at Chelsea. I mean, it's like we do have somebody posted at Chelsea to say, just keep around. Whatever they push out of the door, just give us a phone call and we'll see if we can come in for any of them. And that's been the situation, at least with many of those players. I mean, players that are out of their prime. The only player that Arsenal signed from Chelsea that was not out of his prime was Kai Havertz. But that is because Chelsea felt that maybe he was not going to cut it the way they thought he would cut it when he was joining them from Bayer Leverkusen back then. So my mom says hi. Hi, my mom. Good to have you back. Good to have you back on the broadcast. Kindly like the broadcast, and thank you for joining us this Saturday morning for this edition. For this edition of Saturday Morning Sport, where we're discussing plenty of things. So that is the situation regarding Arsenal and Benjamin Sesko, but also Kepa Arrizabalaga. Then Arsenal are also interested in signing in signing Rodrigo Goes from Real Madrid. That deal, that one is not closed. Some simple conversations have gone on. That's between the players' camp and Arsenal. Sort of, I think, more like inquiry talks, but Arsenal are waiting for whatever decision Real Madrid do make on the 24-year-old Brazilian international, on whether they want to keep him, although reports do suggest that they are willing to let him go for the right value, which is around 90 to 100 million euros. So again, Arsenal look at him as an opportunity in the market, the way they did sign Kai Havertz. Kai Havertz was never on Arsenal's shortlist, but as soon as they had word that Chelsea were willing to do business, they quickly rushed in and signed the German international. So has he been a success at Arsenal? I do not think we can call him a success, but I think he has been an improved version than the one we saw at Chelsea. And that is sort of some form of encouragement. Until he helps Arsenal win some major titles, I do not think Arsenal fans will consider it a success by any account. So there's that. So anyways, maybe briefly going back to the deal of Victor Osimhen. This was a tweet from Gianluca Di Mazzario, who we all know is very, very good with transfer business from the Italian market. He did say that Osimhen agrees personal terms with Al Hilal around 5 million gap on club-to-club side between Al Hilal's bid and Napoli's request. But Victor Osimhen and Al Hilal had already agreed a fee for the transfer. For in terms of personal terms. Yeah. Then Fenerbahce are in the race to sign Leroy Sané on a free transfer from Bayern Munich. Now, Leroy Sané's situation is that he's similar to what Arsenal are having with Thomas Partey. Their contracts run out at the end of the month. Both clubs are trying to negotiate with both players. That's Thomas Partey at Arsenal and Leroy Sané at Bayern Munich to extend their contracts, but the players are yet to agree to terms on what has been offered to them. For Leroy Sané, negotiations have been going on for much longer as compared to those of Thomas Partey at Arsenal, but both parties are yet to reach agreements, and that's why Tottenham did inquire about the availability of Leroy Sané. Arsenal have equally been mentioned in that conversation for the right winger. When I say right winger, it means he's left-footed. For those of you that could be novices in about the footballing language. But then also, Fenerbahce is the latest team that have thrown their hat in the ring to try and sign Leroy Sané. Again, this is according to Sky German, who say Fenerbahce, under the charges of Jose Mario Felix Mourinho, are willing to pay Leroy Sané a net annual salary of up to 15 million euros. Galatasaray's offer remains at 10 to 12 million net range. Saudi clubs are still interested, and Arsenal remain an option. So Tottenham is off. That's despite other reports, and not in the rest. Bayern Munich are hoping for a contract extension after submitting a modified offer. Decision from Sané is expected in the coming days. So Leroy Sané, at the age of 29 years old, is somehow a hot cake. Galatasaray want him, Fenerbahce want him. That's both in Turkey or the Turkish league. Saudi Pro League clubs, those ones are always looking to sign any player in the age of 28, 29, 30 and onwards. And not to say that they do not sign youngsters, but predominantly that age profile. And then Arsenal have inquired about the same player, but I think Arsenal are also trying to be optimistic, saying, okay, if we can get him on a free transfer, even if we put him on a 3-year contract and we are paying him a bit of high wages, he doesn't come at a hefty transfer fee, and he could help us on our right wing, be a very, very potent backup for Bukayo Saka, and that kind of thing. Maybe that's how they are looking at the situation. Although me, I do think that Arsenal shouldn't be going for these kinds of players who I sort of consider some form of projects or players that are out of their prime. They should be going for prime players. And really, that's how I feel about that. As anyways, then I'm moving away from Leroy Sané and all that gossip around Arsenal and things of that nature. David Ancelotti, that's the son to Carlo Ancelotti, who is now the head coach of the Brazil national team. He did sign his contract yesterday to join his father at the Brazil national team. Now, the reason as to why he delayed to join his father when they were crossing from Real Madrid is because he was a candidate for the vacant role at Rangers, that vacant managerial role. However, it has since been given to Russell Martin, who did play for the club in 2018. Now, Russell Martin did start last season as the head coach or the manager at Southampton, and he was sacked. Russell Martin, there in, I think, around December. He was sacked, and then they did appoint Ivan Juric as their replacement, as his replacement. But Juric was also equally shown the exit in April once Southampton's relegation was confirmed. I think that was after the 3-1 loss to Tottenham Hotspurs. So he was shown the exit after just 5 months, or under that, slightly under 5 months in charge of Southampton. So Russell Martin has been appointed as the new Rangers boss. That means David Ancelotti didn't get the job. The other name who had earlier on been considered for the same role was their former manager in Steven Gerrard, but those talks didn't advance pretty much. So there you have it. David Ancelotti joins his father at the Brazil national team. He's worked with him at Real Madrid, at Everton, and at I think Napoli. Yes, in some of his managerial roles. Looks like father and son are not about to part ways in regards to their managerial careers. Then Man City are remaining negotiations with Olympic Lyon over the signing of Ryan Cherki. The player has already agreed to personal terms with Man City for the transfer. He's just waiting on the green light from Lyon to say you can make the trip for the medical, but they are still apart in negotiations in terms of valuation, because Lyon want a fee in the excess of 30 million euros, while what Manchester City did offer in their first bid was under that. And according to Sky Germany, they did say Lyon had rejected the first offer from Man City for Ryan Cherki. The second offer was being prepared while negotiations did continue. Cherki is simply waiting an agreement between the clubs, totally relaxed and fully focused on his game. Remember, first are going to be playing German on Sunday at 4 p.m. For the third place playoff of the UEFA Nations League, while the final will come later at 10 p.m. between Portugal and Spain. So that's for the UEFA Nations League. Then let's talk about Ivan Juric, who was appointed now as the new boss at Atlanta. There, he is the head coach on a 2-year contract. Now, Ivan Juric has sort of burnt his fingers in the last couple of years in terms of managerial spells. He was at teams like Hellas Verona, he was at teams like Torino, and that kind of thing. But last year, like I said, in December, he did replace Russell Martin at Southampton, spent just a couple of months, and he was shown the exit. So at Atlanta, he replaces Gian Piero Gasperini, who had been at the club for 9 years, and they were used to sort of either qualifying for Champions League football or Europa League football, and he will have to maintain those kinds of standards because that's the manager he's replacing. Speaking of Gian Piero Gasperini, he has since joined AC Roma as their head coach down there on a 3-year deal. So Juric does join Atlanta on a 2-year deal. Let's wait and see how that spans out as well. So during his spell at Southampton, he only won one game, and I think they beat up against Ipswich Town by, I think, 2 goals to 1, 3-1 thereabout. That was his only victory in 14 Premier League games. So that's why he was sacked at the end of the day. So, anyways, let's wait and see how things will span out. So, speaking of Roma, like I said, they did appoint Gian Piero Gasperini because 2024, 2025 did not was not a very, very good season for Roma to start with. First of all, they started the season with their legend Daniel De Rossi, who was in charge but was fired after only 4 games because they had 3 points from 4 games. So he was fired. That was around, I think, around September 18. He was sacked, and then Juricic was appointed. So that's why we are still speaking about Ivan Juric. So Ivan Juric was appointed as Danny De Rossi's replacement at AC Roma in the same month. So that was in September. So, sorry, he was appointed, Juric was appointed on 18th September. Yes, after Danny De Rossi had been sacked. But then he was also sacked in November. That's November the 10th, after they had lost to Bologna, I think. And then they were really doing bad because they were only 4 points above the relegation zone on the Italian Serie A table. They were not doing really well in the UEFA Europa League, so they chose to fire him. And then when they fired Ivan Juric, they replaced him with Claudio Ranieri, who did really do magic. He did wonders because then the team went on a 19-game unbeaten run, and they finished, I think, sixth or fifth on that Italian Serie A table. I think fifth, and qualified for Europa League next season. Speaking of the Europa League, I think they got to the quarterfinals or round of 16 because they were knocked out by Athletic Bilbao on their journey there, as far as Roma were concerned. So that conversation also is there. So Juric is now at Atlanta. Then Chelsea were offered the opportunity to sign Mohamed Kudus from West Ham. They did have interest in the player back in 2023 when he was still at Ajax, but he ended up at West Ham. So after 2 seasons at West Ham, they have offered him to Chelsea, and also did inquire about the availability of Keenan Brisbane Hall and goalkeeper Robert Sanchez, who did work with Graham Potter, the current West Ham manager, during their time at Brighton and Hove Albion. So let's keep our eyes on that situation as well. Like I said, Chelsea do remain in conversation with Eintracht Frankfurt over the signing of Hugo Ekitike. At Arsenal, former Juventus head of scouting, as well as Granada, Matteo Tonozzi, is on the verge of joining Arsenal to be part of Arsenal's recruitment team. He could be deputizing Andre Bata, because Jason Aito, who was in that role as Edu Gaspar Daudi's deputy, but then also did serve in the role as an interim until Andre Bata was appointed in March, has since left the club after a period of 10 years at Arsenal. So they are looking for Jason Aito's replacement. And Granada's, the former director at Granada, that's Matteo Tonozzi, is there. He could be heading to North London. So that's some of the news making the rounds. Of course, Nuno Tavares did join Lazio fully after a season-long loan. Albert Samiro Konga, he has admitted just as much that it will be really, really difficult to stay at Arsenal. We'll wait to see what Arsenal will decide to do with Fabio, the likes of Fabio Vieira, but I think they could be looking to move all those off to see. Then Federico Chiesa's priority this summer is to return to Italy, and there is some interest from Napoli there. So let's wait and see. We will keep our eyes on that situation. Then Barcelona have triggered the 25 million release clause for Spanish goalkeeper Joan Garcia from Espanyol. That deal is really, really happening. But Barcelona let's wait and see, because Barcelona are also trying to offer a Voxek Szczesny a 2-year contract when they also still have Marc-Andre ter Stegen, who is their #1 goalkeeper. So will they have 3 top goalkeepers on their hands? They could as well do, but let's wait and see. But for a 24-year-old, is definitely going to be a good replacement for Marc-Andre ter Stegen in the long run. That's the German national team goalkeeper in the absence of Manuel Neuer. So, and then Arsenal legend Patrick Vieira did extend his contract at Genoa. He was subject to interest from some 3 Italian clubs. I think Roma had been one of them at the time, and I think Parma. Yes, I think Parma was one of the others in the race to try and win over Patrick Vieira. So he's chosen to stay with Genoa. He's chose to stay with Genoa, and let's wait and see. He did extend his contract until June 2027. The initial one was expiring, I think, in June 2026. So he has extended his stay. So I think Parma was one of those teams really interested in his services. Yes, as well as other clubs. But let's wait and see. Yes, Roma finished 5th on that Italian Serie A table. Anyways, guys, I think that's the gist of the conversation in regards to Ange Postecoglou, in regards to transfer speculation, and much more in that world. Maybe before we sign out, let's seal it off with the latest in as far as the gossip is concerned, because Nottingham Forest could make the move for Anthony Elanga after being turned down by Bryan Mbuwemo, who we all know has given his preference to Man United. So this is according to Daily Mail, who said Newcastle have made a move to try and sign 23-year-old Sweden winger Anthony Elanga from Nottingham Forest. I do know Nottingham Forest want to extend his contract alongside Callum Hudson-Odoi and Morgan Gibbs-White. So then Liverpool have submitted a fresh bid for Florian Wirtz in the excess of £100 million plus £13 million in add-ons for the Bayer Leverkusen, a 22-year-old German midfielder. And then Arsenal, we've spoken about their interest in Benjamin Sesko. We've spoken about Man United's new bid, second bid for Bryan Mbuwemo. We've spoken about then, yes, Inter Milan have made formal inquiries about signing the 40 million rated Manchester United Danish forward Rasmus Højlund. We spoke briefly about that, but that is according to the Telegraph. And then Lyon did reject Man City's first bid for Ryan Cherki. We spoke about that. And then Tottenham will have to pay in excess of £10 million if they want to bring in Brentford boss Thomas Frank to replace Ange Postecoglou, who was sacked by Tottenham Hotspurs. That is according to Mirror. And then Italian Serie A champions Napoli are weighing up a move for 25-year-old England defender Trevor Chalobah, who is at Chelsea. So they could make a move for him. That's according to the Telegraph. Now, last season, Trevor Chalobah spent the first half of the season on loan to Crystal Palace. That's where they called him from. Then Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, and AC Milan are keen on Italy goalkeeper Gianluigi Donnarumma, 26 years, if he fails to agree on a new deal with Paris Saint-Germain, while Inter Milan and Juventus may wait for his contract to expire in 2026. Now, yes, this is another story that has been quite making the rounds, because Gianluigi Donnarumma, the former AC Milan goalkeeper, has only a year left to his current contract with Paris Saint-Germain. We do know he was quite a standout goalkeeper in their success of the UEFA Champions League, but also overall in the season in which they've won the quadruple, winning the Super Coupe de France, winning the Coupe de France, and then winning the French League One, as well as the UEFA Champions League. Then we've spoken about Arsenal's interest in Kepa Arrizabalaga, and then England midfielder Angel Gomez, who is set to leave Lille at the end of his contract this summer, has an agreement in principle to join Marseille, who have beaten Tottenham and West Ham to land the 24-year-old. Then Marseille have made a contract offer to 29-year-old West Ham and Morocco defender Naif Agad, while Newcastle are growing frustrated at being quoted inflated transfer fees, with Eintracht Frankfurt asking a price for Hugo Ekitike, putting the Magpies off a move of the 22-year-old French forward. Now, I do understand Newcastle are looking for a striker, but making the move for Hugo Ekitike, who is valued at 100 million euros, maybe quite tough, unless they really think they have the possibility of moving on Alexander Isak, who could fetch them really top dollar. But why would you move on Alexander Isak when you've just qualified for the UEFA Champions League and want to try and push for more silverware after winning the Carabao Cup last season, which is your major trophy in 71 years? Really doesn't really count. They were interested in signing Liam Gillap as well, but they lost out on that. They've been interested in Bryan Mbuwemo, but we've spoken about his preferences. So they are in the market for a striker. They did want to extend Callum Wilson, as Callum Wilson's contract that does end this month, but they do have an option in his contract to extend for a further year, but they do not want to exercise that. However, they want to negotiate an incentivized best contract if they are able to extend his stay. So there's that as well. So let's wait and see. But I do not think Newcastle will be making a move for Hugo Ekitike. That deal may be quite too expensive. Then Crystal Palace have explored an ambitious deal for Sporting and Ivory Coast defender Ousmane Diomande, who would cost them about £45 million. If Crystal Palace are making such a move, unless they do anticipate that they will be able to trade off Mark Kay to fetch them some money. But also remember, they are going to be playing in the UEFA Europa League next season, so they are going to need quite a broad squad that can compete on Thursday nights and also remain competitive in the Premier League, or otherwise competing at both fronts with a very tiny squad could really cost their form in one of the two competitions. Usually these kinds of teams tend to struggle when they go to Europe. If they do well in Europe, they struggle back at home. If they remain well competitive at home, they do poorly in Europe. So usually it's not quite easy for them to balance. For those of you that do remember Burnley when they did qualify for the Europa League and when they were still under the charges of Sean Dyche, and then we've seen Everton over the years. We've seen Leicester City in their struggles when they did qualify for Europe and that kind of thing. So it's not always easy to strike a balance. Then Sunderland have rejected an offer from Borussia Dortmund for English midfielder Job Bellingham. That's the brother to Jude Bellingham, but the clubs remain in talks about a deal for the 19-year-old midfielder. Now, apparently there is a €40 million release clause in Job Bellingham's contract, but Borussia Dortmund are trying to pay less, and yet Sunderland are saying they are not willing to listen to anything less than €40 million. So let's wait and see. Then AC Milan have shown interest in Bayer Leverkusen's Swiss midfielder Granit Xhaka, 32, while the Bundesliga club appear keen on bringing in German defender Malik Theo, 23, from the Italian Serie A club. That's according to Kicker in German. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. I think we've exhausted most of the news regarding to Matteo Tonozzi potentially replacing Jason Aito at Arsenal. We've spoken about Ivan Juric being named the Atlanta new boss. We've spoken about, of course, in the work of being fired in the same season for clubs. That was at Roma and Southampton. So quite interesting there. Then we've spoken about Ange Postecoglou sacking. We've spoken about his potential replacements in Oliver Glasner, in Thomas Frank, in Andoni Iraola, in Marco Silva, but also not ruling out a potential return for Mauricio Pochettino. Now, that has not been mentioned expansively in the media, not because Tottenham do not have him on their shortlist, but it emanates from the fact that Mauricio Pochettino does hold at the back of his mind a dream for a potential return to Tottenham Hotspurs one day, where he thinks he did some of his best work, despite going on to teams like PSG, where he went and won the league title there, and also having a season-long worthy of experiential management at Chelsea. That was 2023-2024, and he guided them to what was a fifth place finish on, I think, a sixth place finish on that Premier League table. So I think we've spoken about all that. Then, of course, maybe just to remind you from yesterday's brief, Gabriel Magalhaes did extend his contract with Arsenal, keeping him at the club until June 2029. There, it's a 4-year contract for the 27-year-old Brazilian defender, who has made 210 appearances in an Arsenal jersey and scored as many as 20 goals. He did score, by the way, on his debut back in 2021, because he joined Arsenal in September 2020, so he was there for the 2020-2021 season, also defined as the COVID season. His debut was against Fulham at Craven Cottage, and he did score a goal in the 49th minute. Alexander Lacazette had given Arsenal the lead in that game, I think before halftime, and then he scored in the second half, and then Aubameyang was the other on target, as Arsenal beat Fulham by 3-0. Yes, there. And then what else have we not talked about? We've talked about Benjamin Sesko, we've spoken about Victor Gyökeres, spoken about Bryan Mbuwemo to Manchester United, and all things in that regard, in as far as our talking points today were concerned. So it's been 1.5 hours for the course of this broadcast. So allow me to cut it here, but do not forget to check out our friends at Able State, who say they who offer a digital skills training in cybersecurity, in web design, and coding. Those are quite good soft skills to have, quite advantageous on the dynamic global market. They do offer in-person training sessions as well as online sessions. They offer career guidance, as well as they do help their trainees in post-training to find jobs in the dynamic digital world. So I'll leave a link to their website down in the description so that you can check them out and their offerings as well. So do not forget to check out all our content. We did put out quite a number of shots, I think about 5 or 6 yesterday. Just go under the shorts section on the Footballtribeug UG channel and watch that content as well. Like, comment, share, and also subscribe if you're new to the channel. And then also we did put out that episode our assessment on Arsenal in regards to where we think they do stand, that making our would not be enough to take them from being to take Arsenal from being title contenders, champions. So I think that video is already on the channel. I thank you to all those that have already watched it, and thank you to, and for those that have not yet watched it, we'll also leave its link down in the description so that you can watch it. I will do provide our assessment on the Arsenal squad, who needs to leave, who needs to stay as a squad member, who they need to cash on in, who they need to make a move for potentially in the market, and that kind of thing. But at least they should be signing a minimum of 4 to 5 players, in my opinion. So I'll leave the link to that video down in the description so that you can go and check it out as well. Otherwise, have yourselves a wonderful rest of the day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.